Hi, my name is Masha and in this video I'm going to show you how to make alpha bracelets. So this is the pattern that I ended up choosing for today's video, and if you want to make it yourself, I'm going to link it down below so you can check that out. And if you ever make anything based on any of my videos, I always love to see your creations, so send them over to my Instagram via DMs or just tag me in a post and I'd love to check it out. So differently to normal patterns in which you use all of the strings combined to create the pattern of the bracelet, in alpha bracelets there are two different types of strings. You have the base strings, which are unused and are only used as a base, and you have the main strings, which you then use to weave onto the base strings, and the main strings are the ones that create the pattern and all the colors. When you are creating an alpha bracelet, you are weaving different colors of strings from left to right, from right to left, along the base strings. It is this process of weaving onto the base strings that create the pattern. If you look at the pattern, you can see that it is essentially a bunch of different pixels, a bunch of different dots. Each of those dots represents a different color. Also, each of those dots represents a knot. To determine how many base strings I need to create this bracelet, I have to look at the pattern and count the base strings. The base strings are represented by the threads that are sticking out from the top. In my case, it's 14. I can also see from the pattern that the first couple of rows are made with a dark blue thread. So that is what I'm going to be using for my main string, for now. Again, looking at my pattern, I can see that it uses a bunch of different colors, so I'm going to pick them out now so I don't have to worry about it later. So here are the colors that I've picked out for my bracelet. Right now I'm just going to focus on this one, as it is the first one that I'm going to need because it's the dark blue that I'm going to be using for the background. And I'm going to cut the base strings that I need for my bracelet. I have decided that I want the base strings to be the same color as the background I'm going to be using for my pattern. This doesn't really matter. The base strings are only there for you to weave the colors onto. They are only going to be visible in the ties of the bracelet. They're not going to be visible in the bracelet itself. But I do want the ties to be the same color as the background of my bracelet, so I'm going to use the same color. However, if you don't have enough of the same color, or if you want to use a different color, it's completely up to you and it doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut 14 strings of this color for them to be my base strings. By the way, just because I get this question asked quite a lot, the threads that I'm using are by Loops and Threads and they're called Craft Cord, and I got them at Michael's in the US while I was there. However, it doesn't really matter what kind of thread you use. I'm just using this one because that is what I have. So don't really worry about it, use whatever thread you like and whatever one you have. So when cutting the base string, since you're not going to be actually using them to make the bracelet, so you're not going to be weaving this string, it doesn't have to be super long. So I'm just going to quickly walk you through the process that I use to determine how long I wanted the base strings to be. So you're going to need to use the base string for the ties, so you need to cut according to that. I'd say I'd use about this much for the tie. It is a bit much. You don't really need the tie to be this long, but I like to leave myself a little extra room, just, you know, as wiggle room in case something goes wrong and I run out of string mid-bracelet or something. I like to leave a little bit extra just in case. And since the ties are going to be on both sides, I then double this. So I fold it in half to determine how much it's going to be twice. So that is just for the ties. And then you also add however long you think the bracelet is going to be, add string for that as well. So I think this bracelet, the longest that bracelet is going to be is this. I don't think it's even going to be that long, but I like to, again, give myself a little bit of wiggle room in case something goes wrong. So this is how much I'm going to cut. It's not that long. Just remember that you have to have enough for the bracelet and for the ties, so cut however long you think that is. So once you've cut your strings, what you're going to do is you're going to count them. You're going to count them, and then you're going to count them again, and then you're going to count them again. I cannot tell you how many times I have cut strings, I have started making the bracelet, only to realize that I've cut not enough, or I've cut too many. Even one string can be so annoying when you're trying to make an alpha, because it is very important that you use the exact amount that is shown in the pattern. If you are off by even one string, that is one extra string, one extra row that you don't know what to do with. And if you don't put enough, that is one less string, and then you can't make the bracelet fully. So counting your strings is very important, so count them and count them again and make sure you have exactly the amount that you need before you continue making the bracelet. So now that we have the base strings ready, it's time to think about the main string. My main string, my first main string, is the dark blue, the same color that is this one. But I can't use any of these because these are my base string, so I have to do it a completely separate string. So what I like to do when I have a lot of the color, and in this case I do have a lot of this color because I'm using it for the entire background, is I just don't cut the string. I just use this entire strand, obviously folded like this. I don't unfold it or anything because otherwise it's going to get tangled and it's going to be messy. But I use this entire strand and I just use that. I just don't cut the string. I'm going to show you in more detail how to insert that and how to use that. But for now I'm going to go ahead and do the ties. So as you can see, I made a beginning triangle to start off my bracelet. I'm not going to be showing you how I did that because otherwise this video would be super long, but I made a separate video on that and it's going to be linked in the card and in the description so you can check it out if you want to make one of these for yourself. So once I've done the triangle, because that's what I decided to do, this is the point where I'm going to start making the bracelet. And if I look at my pattern, I can see that the first row is just a row of forward knots with the blue string onto each of the base strings. So that is what I'm going to do. So now I've finished the first row of my bracelet, and looking back at my pattern I can see that the pattern says that I should do 7 rows of just the blue onto the base strings as the background color. But since I've made the triangle beginning to my bracelet, I feel like I already have enough background color, so I'm just going to skip those rows and go straight to row number 8 where the yellow comes in. So that's what I'm going to do now. So looking at my pattern for row number 8, we are going from right to left since my main string is currently on the right, and that is also represented in the pattern as the knots are going to the left. I can see that there are 4 knots of the blue string onto the bass string, then 3 knots of the yellow string onto the bass string, and then the rest of them are blue. So what I'm going to start by doing is I'm going to separate 4 strings of my bass, and I'm going to put the rest to the side, and I'm going to make 4 backward knots with the blue string onto the bass strings. Right, so I've done 4 knots with the blue string onto the bass strings. What I need to do now is 3 knots of yellow. But the question is, where do I get my yellow string? Well, you have to weave it in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this blue string and I'm going to put it aside. I'm going to put it underneath the bracelet so that it's not in the way. I'm going to put it completely underneath and to the side. So now my main string is way over there. I'm not going to use it. It's not my main string anymore. I'm going to put in the yellow string, which is now going to be my main string. So these have already been made. I'm focusing on these. I'm going to separate 3 because that is how many knots I need to make. And I'm going to separate the first one because that is going to be the one that I'm going to weave the string onto. Since I'm doing a backward knot, I like to hold the string in my right hand. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to do a regular backward knot with the yellow string onto the blue string. And I'm going to carefully tie it so that it's nice and tight. So there you go. I have a yellow knot, a backward knot with the yellow string onto the blue string, but it is not in the position that I need it to be. Obviously, I need it to be much higher up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to push it up with my nail. And then you carefully position it and you take the end that is in the way and you put it to the back. You would eventually cut that, but I like to do that at the end. And then the string is weaved in. You can continue making the bracelet with this string. You might be thinking, if we're putting all these strings at the back, I've put this string at the back and the blue one, that the back of the bracelet is going to turn out sort of weird looking, and you would be right. With normal bracelets, the bracelet looks nice on both sides. So with a normal pattern, the front of the bracelet looks pretty much the same as the back of the bracelet, just, you know, slightly different. Obviously, you can tell there's a bit of a difference, but it looks pretty much the same, and you can look at the bracelet at any side and you can see the pattern that is being made, and it's fine. But with alphas, if you look at this bracelet, this is the front of the bracelet and you can very clearly tell what the pattern is from the front, but if you look at the back, it looks really jumbled. You can't make sense of what the pattern is, and you can only really view the bracelet from one side. So I'll leave links to both these patterns below, by the way, if you want to make them or whatever. But yeah, that's what I'm trying to say, is that all of the stuff at the back of the bracelet is going to be at the back, and it's going to look pretty weird like this, so you can only really view it from one side. So yeah, that's why you're putting all of the stuff to the back. So now that I've weaved this yellow string in, I'm going to do 2 more backward knots with the yellow string as my pattern suggests. And while I'm making these knots, I'm going to still be very careful because I did just weave the string in. It's not very secure yet, so I'm going to be very careful and gentle while making these knots. So now that I've done these 3 knots, if I look back at my pattern, I can see that I now have to switch back to the blue string. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the switch. I'm going to pick up these, turn them back, and I'm going to bring the blue string that I took out originally back here and put the yellow string back there. Even though we can still see that it's connected to there, where we left it previously, we are now able to work with it because we brought it to the front. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to zoom you in actually. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to be very careful because as you can see, this yellow string, so if I just started weaving now, you can see that the yellow string, the end of the yellow string would have been pushed out to the front and I would have been able to see it. We want to avoid that. We don't want the yellow string to be seen in the bracelet because that's the tie of it, that's the end of it. We don't need it anymore. It's being pushed out because the blue string is pushing it up. So what we're just going to do is we're going to change them. We're going to put the yellow string behind the blue string so that when we pull the blue string, it doesn't push the yellow string out because the yellow string is behind it. I'm hoping that made sense, but what I'm trying to say is that we put the yellow string out of the way so that the blue string doesn't interfere with it, so it doesn't push it out. So now, if we pull the blue string over, nothing comes out here because we already put the yellow string away on both sides. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a backward knot with the blue string onto the rest of the strings that are here for this row. And again, for the first row, for the first knot, sorry, that I'm going to be making, I'm going to be very careful because I'm pulling the string across 3 rows. So there are 3 bass strings that I've completely ignored with the blue one because I've made them in yellow. So I'm going to be very careful because I'm pulling the string over by 3 rows without actually making the knots. And if I do this too tight, I'm going to end up pulling the bracelet too tight together and it's going to interfere and it's going to make it wonky. So I'm going to be very gentle yet firm. I'm not going to fast forward this so that you can get to see exactly what I'm doing. I might sort of readjust since it's the first one. Again, it's the first knot after a different string colour. It's a bit gentle, so I'm going to be very careful here. Alright, there you go. We've successfully changed the string, the main string, from the yellow to the blue. So I'm just going to continue with the blue string to the end of the row as the pattern suggests. And then goes the next row. Once I get to the end of the row, I like to sort of push the knots a little bit, readjust them to make them the way that I want them, to make sure that they're aligned the way that I want them. Okay, so looking at my next row, which is the 9th row of this pattern, I need to make 6 blue knots, then 5 yellow knots, and then 3 more blue knots. So I'm going to separate the 6 blue knots first. I like to separate my threads first, just in case I get carried away, so I don't do extra knots, because undoing knots is a pain. Alright, so just to confirm that there are 6, I'm going to do 6 forward knots with this string before I continue to my next one. Alright, so now we've done the 6 knots that I needed to do. I'm going to put the blue string back again, since we're switching the string. And I'm going to separate 5 strings for the yellow. So now I'm going to bring the yellow string back down, since that is the one that I'm going to be needing. And make sure that the blue string stays all the way back up. Again, when I bring the string down, I make sure that none of them are intersecting at the back. So none of them are interfering or intersecting with one another, it's fine. The blue string is all the way back there, the yellow string is here. So now that I have the yellow string back here, I'm going to make 5 forward knots with it, because that is what my pattern tells me to do. So now that I'm done with the yellow, I'm going to put it back again, and I'm going to bring out the blue. Again, carefully making sure that they're not intersecting in any way that is going to be bad for me, in the sense that they're not going to be pulling on each other. And the last 3 knots of this row are blue knots. So that's what I'm going to do. So that's what you do. You look at your pattern, you identify what knots you need to make, you identify what direction they're going, and you interchange the strings depending on how the pattern requires it. So I'm going to do a couple more rows, and once I get to my next colour, I'm going to show you how I introduce another colour into the combination. So I've done a couple more rows, and I'm now on row 20. So now the first couple of knots that I need to do are 8 blue knots to the left, so that's what I'm going to do. So now that I've done the blue knots, I'm going to put the blue string back, because now it's time for the light blue string. I don't need too much of this one because there's not too much that colour that I'm going to use, so I'm just going to cut a little bit of it, and I'm going to weave this string into the bracelet. So again, I am doing a backward knot, so I'm going to put the string into my right hand, and I'm just going to do a backward knot with the light blue string onto the base string. And I'm going to push it up with my nail. And this end I'm going to insert in the back. I'm going to pull it up so it's out of the way. So I have 2 knots that I need to make, so I've made 1, and I'm going to make a second one with the same thread. And now I put this string into the back again because I don't need it anymore for this row. And I'm going to pull the dark blue string back, carefully making sure that none of the strings are interlining and none of them are pulling on each other. I'm going to finish this row with the dark blue string. And that's how it's done. That's how you read alpha patterns. So you go in with the colours that you need to go in with, you weave in extra strings. So you weave your string from left to right, from right to left according to your pattern, and you add as many colours as you need by weaving them into the pattern as well. And that's how you do it. It's pretty simple. Just do it a couple of times, get the hang of it, and in no time you'll be a pro in creating bracelets. So just one more tip for you guys at the end. If you have strings that you don't need, so like this end I obviously don't need anymore, I can just go in and cut it. Just cut it off just like that. So by the end of it, as I showed you in the previous bracelet, you're just going to have this at the other side. It doesn't look very pretty, but it does on this side. So don't worry about it. So yeah, I'm just going to finish this bracelet off now. So there you go. There's my finished alpha bracelet. I really love this pattern. I think it's really cute. And if you guys want to make it too, it's linked down below in the description. And if you want to learn how to make this triangle beginnings and ends to your bracelets, the video for that is going to be linked below as well. And if you're curious, this is how the bracelet looks from behind. I always like to see how the bracelets turn out from behind because it's kind of interesting how all the threads sort of align and weave in and out of the bracelet. So you can see here that that's one of the stars and it pulls all the way over here to the second star. That's kind of cool. Some of them I just cut them and I didn't pull them across. But yeah, you don't have to do that. You can just pull them. So yeah, that's how my alpha bracelet turned out, and I hope you guys learned something new today, and you can make alpha bracelets now. If you have any questions or suggestions or anything, leave them in the comments down below. I always read all of your comments, and if you ever make anything based on any of my videos, I always like to see your guys' creations, so send them over to me on Instagram via direct messages or just tag me in a post. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!